He's an America's accountant. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Dan Geltrude. Is it just that simple that, payments have gone higher? I mean, look, I think we said this in our an editorial. When you walk on a car lot nowadays, they ask you what you can afford per month. They don't ask you what you can spend. I think that's ridiculous.
Well, Scott, let me say this, and you and I have talked about this time and time again. What these record high delinquencies are telling us is that the economy is a lot more fragile than one might think. Now, I'm not blaming President Trump for that, because the guy just got there. You got to give him a chance to see, whether his policies are going to fight inflation and some of the other ills that we're feeling right now. But inflation remains a big challenge for U.S. consumers. So the rising prices and interest rates, are making affordable cars, difficult to find. So this is what I say. You should only buy or lease a car that you can afford. I mean, it's common sense, because having an expensive car, Scott, does not make you rich. Right. As a matter of fact, a car is a terrible investment. Terrible. So let's get focused in on being responsible consumers and only purchase a car or lease a car you can afford. And that should be, quite frankly, a used car. There's nothing wrong with a used car.
Well, I drive a 12-year-old car, so does my wife, so that'll tell you where we're at on that. But I'm not a car person, so there are people out there that may be car people. But my question to you is, you say that you can afford. I mean, some people now, with the two car payments they may have in their family between themselves and their wives or whomever, it's approaching a mortgage payment and or more. I mean, what do you say to them?
Well, I say that is really fiscal irresponsibility. You have to look at a car. You're going from point A to point B, right? There's four wheels, a steering wheel, brake, and so on, right? So it's all about, in terms of affordability, how you can get from one place to the next reasonably priced. Now, if you're interested in people seeing you go by, let's say, in the Cowmobile and saying, whoa, look at that, well, that's a different story, because that's advertising, Scott, so you could have an expensive carmobile. But for the rest of us, we shouldn't get caught up in the images of a car and what it means, because it really doesn't mean much at all.
Don't you think we should be smarter, too, though? I mean, when you walk in a dealership, I haven't done it in a long time, but, I mean, they ask you what you can afford per month, not what you can spend, right? And it just so happens that the guy that runs Camping World, I saw an ad this weekend while watching sports. I don't know what I was doing. But it struck me that now they're advertising these mobile homes and these campers and these, they're advertising them on for $595 we can get you into this per month. Right? They're not telling you what the actual price was, even on the television ad. So they're only talking about your monthly spend, which used to be over 4 years, and then it was 5. I mean, I don't know. How far do car loans even go nowadays? 6, 7, 8 years?
Right. And, you have to look at it two different ways here, because when you're purchasing a home, it's a much different approach, because you're figuring, okay, 30 years to pay this off. So what's that monthly payment going to be? With a car, you're absolutely right. You should not be looking to pay off a car for 30 years. If you're going to do that, yeah, well, I can get you in a car for $50 a month. So that is not the way to look at a car purchase. The way you look at a car purchase is to say, how much does this thing cost? And then go to the monthly payment, as opposed to when you're buying a home and it's somewhat reversed in your approach.
And to your point, I mean, all the things, but 30 years, this goes back to 1994, so arguably almost 31 years. This is the most they've seen since, they began tracking it, which, all right, let's go to an economy point of view. Where does that put this economy? I mean, you started off by saying you thought it was pretty fickle. I mean, I agree with you. But, I mean, how fickle is it? I mean, obviously today it's pretty fickle. You can see what the markets are doing. But when does this stop?
Well, when it stops, Scott, when people really reduce their borrowing. And I know that becomes complicated, because having access to loans is really what makes the economy move. But when people are getting in over their heads, and that's really what this discussion is about, getting credit related to a car is probably a little bit too easy and putting people in a position where they're taking out a loan that they shouldn't, particularly when you're talking about a car. Think about it. As you're paying down the car, it becomes worth less and less.
Yes.
That's just bad investing, as opposed to a home where over time you're going to get appreciation. So that, again, when we look at car versus home, it's two different things. And what's probably happening, Scott, is people are looking at that approach of purchasing a car and a home the same way. Mm-hmm. And it's not a good financial plan.
Yeah, well, what can you get me into at this amount of money per month? And that's just not the right, you can do that, you're right, with a house, but you should not be doing that with a car. And that's unfortunately the way they're doing it now. And they're doing it now with campers and the likes, like I just saw this weekend. So we'll see if the economy can weather through this storm. But right now, we're a pretty shaky ground. Thanks for coming on the show, Dan. Always great to have you on. You tell it like it is. Dan Geltrude coming to us from Nutley, New Jersey.